I think 2005, December 7th is when we launched the company. But Jan 7th, the iPhone launches. It's Steve Jobs on the stage in Macworld, and he says, here's the iPhone. He gets off the stage. Within 15 minutes, I get a call from Apple. I get a call from AT&T saying, hey, would you like to be a launch partner for the iPhone in the US? And that was June of 2007. We officially launched and never looked back.
Hi, I'm Maximilian Büsser, founder of MB&F. To me, watchmaking is art with a capital A. Watchmaking is about creating kinetic sculptures. Watchmaking is, more importantly, a mindset. It's a journey. The history of watchmaking is filled with adventurers, dreamers, engineers, artists who will each in their own way contribute to a better world. The watchmaking journey is first and foremost about very special individuals. Some are rebels and mavericks, and most have a little touch of madness. Now, over the years, we've come to realize that many MB&F owners are adventurers themselves. A collector's circle called The Tribe is full of such individuals. Many have amazing lives and stories to tell, and this is why I decided to start this podcast. And today, I'm very glad to welcome Shashi Reddy, one of the first members of our tribe. He came from India to the US as a teenager with a head full of dreams. He has accomplished so much since, and in parallel, is an impressive collector. Shashi, welcome to the Tales from the Tribe, our MB&F podcast.
Max, thank you so much. Very gracious for your amazing words. I could say the same thing about you.
Thank you so much. Let's just dive right in. Shashi, what's your definition of style?
Style is confidence. For me, the one word that comes when I think of style is confidence. It could come from a compliment that you got on something you're wearing. It could come from your competence in what you do in life. It could come from the way you carry yourself. I always think of my mom and my grandmother. Not much money, not many accessories, not much things in life, but they carried themselves with a certain style. Where they entered a room, everybody would say, oh, wow, that's incredible. It's just, I guess, a pep in the step. Is the right way to describe it?
You know what? You just made me remember that my mom was exactly that. My mom was Indian, and when she entered in a sari anywhere in Switzerland, because we lived in Switzerland, the room would stop. And not only because she was wearing a sari, because she was so stylish. Thank you for reminding me of that. You're so right. So again, we've got Indian backgrounds. Before we talk about your journey, where are you from?
South India, from a small, no longer a small city, but a city called Hyderabad.
Not a small city anymore, for sure.
It is not a small city.
And so I think all of us have been defined by our childhood. Would you mind sharing an experience that helped you define your outlook on life?
I would put it in 3 chapters. Early childhood that I can remember, maybe 3-5 years old. I was an exceptionally introverted child, which meant I lived in a certain world of my own. I didn't like interacting with others, whether it was my toys or little cars that my aunts and uncles would get me as gifts. I would play with them. And that continued well into my, maybe 10, 11 years old. And it became mechanical. I'd like to take things apart and put things apart. I remember my dad got a gift from his company for being in the company for 20 years. He got a watch, an HMT watch. If most of you don't know, it's called Hindustan Machine Tools. It was an Indian government-owned corporation. And I just wanted to see what it was like to take it apart and put it back together. For me, the childhood was about diving deep into how things worked, how I could understand mechanical things. I could take apart, my dad's scooter or a watch and figure out how things worked. I never really could figure out that about human beings.
I don't think we'll ever manage that. But is there a lesson from your father or from your mother that has accompanied you your whole life?
The biggest one is my dad. My dad had a sense of optimism that I had never seen another human being carry. I'll tell you a story later on in life. Forget about childhood just for a second. Later on in life, my dad was in the hospital in coma for 45 days. We didn't know if he was going to make it or not. He had a massive brain stroke, which led to a whole bunch of complications. Finally, he came out of coma and he asked to see me and my sister, and we both walk into the room. And here's my dad on the bed. His dentures are out because he's been in coma. He gives me the biggest smile in the world. And I said, Dad, how are you? All in shock. And he says, fantastic. I don't know why they have me in a bed. But he carried that personality since my childhood. I remember it didn't matter what our family was going through, where our incomes were, what challenges were outside. He always had a personality that just smiled and said, how's life? Fantastic. It's an approach that I hold true to myself today. I just go, sun is shining, we are healthy, everything's going to be amazing.
Again, you remind me of something else with my mother, actually. In her 70s, I one day was having lunch with her, and I actually looked at her and I said, Mom, I've never heard you or Dad say anything nasty or ironic or snarky about anybody. She just looked at me and she said, why would we? I think that generation and the values they were brought up with and they carried, we owe them so much today.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
So fast forward, you're born in India. First days in the US, how did that happen?
So I graduate, I have a mechanical engineering degree. I graduate engineering in India. And my dad tells me, I think your personality is best suited for America. I was very entrepreneurial. I had a mindset of always, trying things out. I said, India is not the place for you. I really want you to get a master's degree, but I don't have enough money. So he gave me a one-way ticket, and I think he had $700. It's like, this is what I can afford to give you, but you need to go to America. I applied to colleges everywhere in the US, got admitted to most of the places. My grades are always pretty amazing. But this was 1995. There was a thing in US where every college almost required you to pay one semester's of fees as a foreign student. And I didn't have, that was in those days about $3,000, and I didn't have $3,000. So I wrote to many professors saying, I would be a teaching assistant, research assistant. So there was one professor in Alabama that reached out and said, hey, I'll take you on if you be my research assistant, teaching assistant, and you're going to publish a paper for me. I'll take you on, but I'll waive your entire fees. That was like a God's gift to me. And you have to understand, this is 1995. India opened to the Western world only in 1991, 92. I had no idea where Alabama was on a map. And Max, I'll age ourselves, right? You have to put it in time. I grew up in India where we got video cassettes of movies much, much later. The only thing I was exposed to about America was Wall Street or Beverly Hills Cop. Because that's what I saw. So I land in Atlanta and I'm transported 120 miles to Alabama, Auburn. I wake up the next day. I'm looking around going, there's no tall building. I don't see anything that I remember. I didn't see the palm trees. I know nothing about geography. It's like, did they land me in the wrong country? That was my first early experience of US.
And so you arrive with a suitcase full of dreams, I can imagine.
That's it.
What are the dreams?
The dreams are, first, I have to get a master's degree. So my father ingrained in me that I have to have at least a master's degree because that's what he had. And he made sure he ingrained in both of the kids that I want you to be very well educated. I think that generation didn't think much of material things. They thought about knowledge and advanced degrees as a way of life. So first things I did, I was also in love with my wife in India. We met in undergrad. And I had made a commitment to her that I'd finish my master's, come back and marry her. That was a big burden on the shoulders because I'm a young man. I know nothing about the future in the US. So I have to finish my master's, get a job offer, come back and show her dad, who was a predominant doctor in India, an eye surgeon, say that I'm worthy of your daughter. So full of dreams, but a lot of ambition. So I finished my master's in 9 months, 10 months. Finished defending it, went back to India, got married in December 96, moved to the US back in January, and moved to Atlanta in March of 97.
So Lucky is a wife.
Yes.
And so she was okay to go to the US with you?
She was. We met when she was 17 and I was 18. We were so in love and, starry-eyed, wide-eyed, all about experiences in life. We didn't have preset notions of how we were going to be or live a certain life. All she knew is she wanted to be with me. All I knew is I wanted to be with her. And it seemed the US was the place for us because that's where I got my first job.
Amazing. And so with your wife, with Lucky, you're going to co-found your first company together. That's 2006, I think. Huh? It's a mobile accessory brand, and you actually created before the iPhone comes out. So how does that happen?
I'll take you 2 steps before Casemate. I decided to be an entrepreneur pretty early on. And I started a contract manufacturing business out of India. I'd supply components, die castings, injection moldings, and sheet metal fab to large companies in the US out of India. I did that for a year and a half, 2 years almost. I had an offer from someone and I sold it. And at the ripe age of 28 or 29, I had a brilliant idea that I should launch Budweiser in India. I think American beer is going to do really well in India. Indians were exposed to the West in terms of brands and goods, and the whole IT revolution is happening. So me, with a big dream and no money, managed to convince a whole bunch of people that they should do a joint venture with me. And I launched Budweiser in India in 2004 and 5.
So wait a minute, you managed to convince Budweiser?
Yeah.
Give you the exclusivity of the brand for a billion people.
It is not exclusivity. We did a 50-50 joint venture. I had my family, uncles and aunts, and everybody that gave me $2 as an investor on my side, and Anheuser-Busch at that time on the other side with 50%. And we set up a 500,000 hectoliter brewery in South India, outside of Hyderabad, expecting to sell to 2 states. I was back then Andhra Pradesh and Maharashtra, with a business plan that said 5 years we'll do really well. What we expected to fill out in capacity in 5 years, we filled it out in 3 months. The appetite for foreign beer was just massive. And at that point in time, Anheuser-Busch decided that they wanted to expand across India and invest a lot more money into a lot more breweries, which I did not have access to, but I did have a great exit route with them. So I exercised my option to exit the business, which was very, very comfortable. I mean, remember, I'm very young. It's a lot of money for me. So in 2005, we sold, and Lucky and I decided to do nothing for 4 or 5 months, like nothing. Then she said, hey, this is really boring. We should try something for fun. The fun for her, she's a super creative person, very, very creative. And I'm just an engineer and a hustler. I can figure out how to make things anywhere in the world. So our thesis was, we were using Blackberries, Sony Ericsson P900, Siemens SX56, if you remember devices of the day. We were using really advanced smartphones, which was reserved for the 1 to 2% of the world. My thesis was that 1 to 2% of Blackberries and smartphones would grow to 15% because the productivity advantages were there. That was the thesis. And we said, let's do this for fun. So we designed our first form-fit injection molded cases. Before that, they did not exist in the market. So we came up with the very first form-fit case. The cases that you see on an iPhone and most devices today were first designed by us. And we showed it to AT&T, to everyone that would take a meeting from us. And I think 2005, December 7th is when we launched the company. 2006, we putzed around. I think we did a couple of million in revenue, nothing significant to speak about. But Jan 7th, the iPhone launches. It's Steve Jobs on the stage in Macworld, and he says, here's the iPhone. He gets off the stage. Within 15 minutes, I get a call from Apple. I get a call from AT&T saying, hey, would you like to be a launch partner for the iPhone in the US? And that was June of 2007. We officially launched and never looked back.
Wow. So luck plays a role, right?
Timing.
We're at the beginning of your entrepreneurial story. Casemate is going to go and grow a lot and be incredibly successful. Is that because you had a first mover's advantage, or is there other reasons to that?
I think it's a combination of multiple things. I think luck has a major factor to play in everything. Second piece was our ability to execute and read the market, constantly maneuvering the market, taking certain positions in the market. Early on, we had a competitor, Otterbox, that makes really rugged cases. And I took a stance that most humans want to decorate their phone not just to protect. Protection is a given, but you have to have people feel confident and stylish about their cases. So we took a path of going to do more women's and stylish cases than the protection route. And that seemed to be that was an anchor for the brand. And having the right team surround you from an early stage onwards, leaning really heavy into their execution abilities. Because again, my confidence and my competence come from the competence of the team I have. You have a vision as an entrepreneur. You have incredible vision sometimes. But the competence of the team that can execute on it, the global supply chain that they need to execute on my vision, it's all on the team.
So would that be the advice you give someone who's considering to start a business, or is there other advice you would give today?
Advice today, here's the advice I give my son. Start early, try a lot of things, fail a lot, get up every time you fail, because your first business will never be a success. It might be your 10th one. But the ability to show up to the start line every time you fall is what's going to make you successful. Perseverance, more than anything else. Entrepreneurship is a journey of perseverance.
I was actually talking with my wife the other day. I think one of the biggest assets we can try and teach our kids is grit.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to teach that. You come from nowhere. I come from virtually nowhere. Grit was a given. I mean, if you didn't have it, you didn't exist. How do we do that for the next generation?
I'm doing my part. So my son is 19, and he's in college entrepreneurship and finance at GW. He's in second year, and I'm highly encouraging him to drop out.
Oh.
I'm that father. He had an incredible idea this summer that was related to cars. He's got a passion around cars just like I do. And we started toying around making accessories for Land Rover Defenders. So we set up a company. It's been 110, 120 days now. We set up a company. It's called Artemis. We make accessories for Defenders as kits. And we started selling it to dealers. In the last 110 days, we've designed products, we've sourced products, we've manufactured products. We've sold it to 2 dealership chains. And the products are actually in dealerships today. And my coaching to him is, as soon as this hits $10 million of revenue, which should be Q2 next year, you should quit your school. Because you're going to learn more doing the business than trying to learn about business in business school.
I so agree. And question I like to ask entrepreneurs is, looking back, is there anything you would have done differently in your journey?
So I'll use a little chapter from the Bhagavad Gita. Every thought is a seed. Every seed that is nurtured grows into a tree. You have to choose the right seeds, which is the right thoughts. They have to be well-intentioned. They have to have the most amount of nurturing from the right people. Early on, it's really important to make sure your intentions are right. Whatever business and venture you go towards, the intent has to be pure from the heart. Second, surrounding yourself with the right energy. Uh, you will you will hear 99 out of 100 people tell you always it's a bad idea, it's not worth doing. If you keep listening to the same people, you'll never get off the ground. You got to surround yourself with the right nurturing of that seed that says, hey, go try it. If you get a no, try it again. Get a no, try another way again. Just get a no, try another way again. So make sure the intentions are right. Make sure you surround yourself with the right advisors, the right friends, and the right team.
Let's switch gears. I've always been very impressed with your taste. And not in watches, in cars, in architecture. I know that with Lucky, you built an incredible home in Atlanta. Can you maybe just describe it a little bit for us? And then I'll ask you a few questions around it.
So, we both grew up in India. For us, a house meant it is concrete, steel, it's actual material. So if you touch something, it has to be that material. It cannot be just faux anything. So that's the first context of the home. But when I met Lucky, first year of college, she did computer science. And she really didn't want to study computer science. She wanted to be an architecture student. But her father insisted that computer science was the way of the future. So she begrudgingly did computer science. But she's always had a flair for design and art and architecture. So when we graduated, we moved to the US. We made do with small apartments. First house was meager. Second home was meager. Finally, when the time came for both of us to just take a step back from business, I said, this is the gift we should give ourselves. Have no restraint on budget, have no restraint on time, and build something our heart desires. So a lot of the inspiration for what the house is, it does come from her. We did have an exterior architect, an interior architect, a landscape architect, and a lighting architect. But all of those guys pretty much took her vision and made it a reality. Her vision was to have a home that felt homely and not like a palace or a mansion. We come from a small part of India where everyone lives next to each other. So your neighborhood should be something like that. You should not have to drive to your mailbox and live in a fancy mansion with walls. So they're big criteria. But at the same time, when you enter the house, it should reflect our values. So every piece of art is a journey that we've had for 20 years, something we've collected, something we've commissioned. And when you visit Atlanta, you will see first art piece that you come when you open our main foyer is you see this beautiful sculpture of a guy standing. He looks like he's guarding the house, but he's not. His head basically flows back into earth. It's called Roots of the Mind. It's made out of wood. And it's all about reminding anyone that comes home that it is a circle of life. Don't feel too much pride on who you are and what you are. Humility is a way to start. So our home opens with that. And every room you walk through will be a certain display of art, which means something to her and me together, something we've collected, something we've cherished together.
It's a journey.
When you walk our home, it's actually a journey of our 30-year relationship.
Wow. So it's interesting because I'm completely lost when you talk about architecture. When we created our first flat with my wife, and the architects were showing us the drawings, I was completely clueless. When I look at a design of a watch, if I draw a watch, or I look at something that my friend Eric Giroux or now Max Martens has done, I immediately see it in 3D. And then I build on it and I have ideas. When I look at plans of a house or a derelict house where my wife will look at it and say, wow, we could do this. I'm like, really? Did you have that? Did Lucky have that? How did you take your creative decisions together?
The creative decisions were hers, to be blunt. But the engineering that went behind, I absolutely played a part. So if you run a plumb line through our house, if you put a laser level, everything will be even. I mean, you cannot be a couple of millimeters off anywhere. And that's really hard to do in modern construction and concrete. But that's my precision. But the artistic side of everything absolutely comes from her.
Okay. I've seen photos of your garage, and we'll come to your cars collection, which is astounding for me. So you collect cars, you collect watches. Is there anything else you collect?
Friends.
That's the best.
Long relationships. Lifelong relationships.
And how do you nurture those relationships when you're so busy and on all these different projects and your family? How do you keep that going?
We make time. Both of us do. We absolutely work on it. And we try to get as many friends together, as often together. And, culturally, celebrations are our thing. Whether it is an excuse of a festival, excuse of a puja, or someone's getting married or someone's getting a child, we all get together, we all dress up, we all make it a point to celebrate. Life is too short to live without celebrating as many times as possible in a year and in your lifetime.
Let's come back to collecting objects. Why do you collect? I mean, why do you collect cars? Why do you collect watches? What does it bring to you?
Both are mechanical objects that I understand. First, it's just a basic, what I grew up with. I like to take things apart and understand mechanically how things work. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. I'm fascinated with the evolution of machines. Let's go to cars for a second. The cars I've collected, or I call my own today, it's very eclectic. Not many people would truly get it. It is because it's a path of how I see car design and car engineering has evolved. It's a mixture of both art and design. If you go back to the 50s, everything was sketched by hand. There was a guy who looked at a design and said, this is my point of view, and I'm going to give a point of view. Rarely was it put through a CAD or some tunnel. It was just a point of view of some artist.
And there was no chief marketing officer, and there was no market study, and of course there were no regulations either.
But then you had another guy who said, oh, let me put amazing engineering in it. And as an example, I have a 54 D-Type, which was the first car to have an aerodynamic engineer from World War II planes design a car. He had a point of view. It was the first car that went 175 miles an hour in the Le Mans races, right? So to me, that was a point of view from World War II to later on how car design changed. It was the first car to use disc brakes. So you had a guy who designed it, an engineer who went back and said, I'm going to design amazing brakes for it. Then you come to 55, I have a gull wing that has the first fuel injection in the world. And, fuel injection today is taken for granted, but you have to go back into 1955 and understand how important it was. But how do you combine design and engineering in one object? Two guys had to come together to create something amazing. So to me, every car that I've collected, whether it's the Ferraris, the Jaguars, the Aston Martins, it's a history. You can literally watch the history of cars from World War II. Me growing up in India, I was more exposed to European cars than American. So that's predominantly what I have. But it is about a journey, both artistic and mechanical. And it is about pushing the limits of mechanical engineering, pushing the aesthetic proportions of design.
And honestly, that's one of the things I've always admired with you. It's not about owning. It's not about having that bucket list of that's what great collectors have, so I need to have the same thing, because I see that a lot. It's really understanding the why of each car and how it represented something groundbreaking in the history of car making. And this is sort of a discussion I would like to do a separate podcast on, just on that. So, which brings me then to watches. You've lasered. I've known you for soon 20 years. You've lasered in way before anybody else on many of the great creations, great creators. Is that the same way you functioned when you started collecting horology?
So you channeled something. I'll post on you a little bit. I bought the first MB&F HM2. If I remember, that was 2007 or 2006, somewhere in that time frame.
2008, because it came out in 2008. Yeah.
I remember buying it from Le Bijou in Florida and reaching out to you to say, hey, I bought this watch. Now I want to change it because I don't like it. You had never customized a watch for anyone. I don't know if you remember, but you did. You changed the material of the watch for me.
And I've never done anything else since. So all the people who are listening to this podcast, please do not start writing into me. I did it once. It was for Shashi. And I'm theoretically never going to do it again.
But there was a certain joy back in the day. So you go back to 2000, me having access to money to buy watches, right? 2003 to 2007. That period of time was kind of golden for me because you had to go into forums. You had to really discern what you liked, what you didn't like. You had the likes of F.P. Richard Mille, MB&F, all of you guys coming into force, making some incredible creations. In today's numbers, they seem like a value. But at that time, it was still a lot of money. But you had to learn a brand and you had to say, I like this product for a reason. In the last 10 years, the world of watches has changed to where it's just, I can afford anything I want and I can go buy. And I think it's a very different mindset that existed before. I kind of miss that because I don't find the journeys anymore. It's a lot of marketing and hype. And the true journey of saying, I do want to meet a Richard Mille. I do want to meet a Max. I want to meet them. I want to know what they were thinking when they came up with this creation. And that was exciting. And then looking forward to each creation that came from these houses was magical. When there was no hype, you have to go back. There was no hype around the watches.
It was horrendously difficult for all of us. Now, even Richard now is, of course, $1 billion a year company. I mean, I remember our best retailers we had in common would tell me they took 3 years to sell their first RM1 because nobody wanted it.
Nobody
wanted it. It was just weird, expensive. People didn't get it. And he was a trailblazer. He was one of the trailblazers. I always credit him. In the beginning of the year 2000s, there was the Freak, there was Richard Mille, there was Orwerk, there was Vianney. We did a few things with the Opus, etc. It was the beginning of a movement, and very few people got it. So when you were owning pieces like that, what did people in those days say to you or actually react? Because most people didn't get it.
So everybody thought I bought some cheap. Most people, 99% of the population, thought I bought something cheap in China. Because how do you explain an Urwerk when the only point of contact somebody has is a Daytona from Rolex? That's it. Or it doesn't have the Patek name or a Vacheron name. They don't understand what an Urwerk is. It looks like it's gray metal. It's a weird shape. They go, what is this thing? Or even a Max Bruiser. I remember getting the Sidewinder. In white gold from Geneva Boutique, and I was wearing it. Most people didn't understand what that was. And it took a lot of time for people to get it, but there was a certain joy in exploring. I call it's the early age of exploring. You're trying to discover both a brand and a creation without any hype or noise around it. I remember my first F.P. Jaune, I think it was 2004 or 5. I bought a Resonance. It was pink gold. I paid $32,000 for it. Nobody wanted it. I paid $32,000. But such was the world. It was both the joy of I am wearing something nobody else understands. I also know the mechanics behind it, and I know why I bought it.
And you know the creator, and you've got to know them. And it's one entrepreneur speaking to another entrepreneur. So now a certain amount of brands which you started collecting a long time ago have become very successful. Do you therefore lose a little bit of interest in them? Or do you still collect?
Lose interest is a tough word because I'm mechanically driven, so I'm always interested. But the journey no longer exists. And brands have become more commercial, and you are engaging people on a creative level on the journey of how you're creating your next product, engaging your tribe, which I think is very rare now, which almost sets you apart from the entire world of watches.
Well, there's a whole new generation of younger creators coming out, luckily, and we're really happy to welcome them. What's interesting is that they're very classic. They're even a little bit neo-retro and very simple watches, beautifully made, beautifully finished. You who, with us, rode that wave of contemporary watchmaking 20 years ago, what's your take on this new generation of classic watchmakers?
It doesn't appeal to me. I apologize, and I'll be very blunt. Everybody's taste is subjective. It's just not me. I think they're super cool. They're super amazing. But the quirkiness is not there in it.
You don't get that adrenaline spike.
I mean, for me, it's an object, right? An object needs to have a lust factor to it. And if I don't see an object and I feel a certain lust, and all I hear is how amazingly well it's made and executed and why you should love it, then it's somebody telling me to love an object, not me falling in love with an object.
I think it's a great definition. We need to fall in love with a watch or with a car because it resonates with our value, and not love it because everybody else loves it. And that's something we've been battling over the last years, where, in a way, the success of watchmaking for me is a curse, because it's brought in a lot of people who like to buy watches or to wear watches, but not for the reasons we actually create them for. Before we wrap up our conversation, you've got a new venture, because you took a step back at some point, and I love that. You took a step back to take much more time with your family, and now you're back on the ring. And what is your new venture?
So we have the largest distillery for bourbon in the US. But to sell bourbon not in the US, to take bourbon to India. So to put it in context for you, India has the largest drinking population in the world. The number one drink of choice is brown liquor, usually scotch, mixed blended scotch. And nobody's really done a great job of introducing bourbon. If you think of bourbon, it's 51% corn, so it has a slightly sweet taste to it compared to whiskeys, which are malt-based, which is kind of harsh. It goes really well with a spicy food.
Yeah.
So what do you think of Indians when you think of when they're drinking? They want their spicy snacks and their brown liquor. So we just opened this year in January, and our whiskeys will age 1 year in this January. So I'll start taking small batches of bourbon to India and start launching bourbon in India in a meaningful way.
Was there bourbon in India before? Or?
It is there, but only as an afterthought. So you do have the likes of Jim Beam, Four Roses, and a few other brands, but it is just put on a shelf and expected to sell because it's bourbon. I'm taking a very different perspective, which is my car driver can only afford a certain price point, which means I want to sell bourbon at 1,000 rupees. Everything in India is sold mostly to the premium sector, to the urban crowds. I want to drive it down to the average guy who's drinking mostly GNS with color and flavor and calls it blended whiskey. I want to sell him 100% bourbon at that price. It's very similar to how I launched Budweiser. Budweiser wasn't super premium. It was just 20% more premium to the regular Indian beers. I want to bring mass bourbon to India in a meaningful way.
I'm listening to you, and I feel like you're this unique mix of somebody incredibly pragmatic and somebody in a different way incredibly romantic. And you just go from one to the other. So we're having this incredible conversation on this romantic part of artisanal watchmaking, and then you're like, I want to bring bourbon to the masses. It's really, really unique. But you know what? It makes me think of something else. It's a thought I would like to share. I'm actually deeply convinced that beauty is what inspires the best of us. And I think you're one of the people who in your life has been governed by that. I'm not talking specifically about expensive things. Beauty hides everywhere. And Dostoevsky, the Russian writer, said beauty will save the world. When I speak to you and we explore your love for style, design, art, I have a very strong urge to learn so much more about other domains I actually haven't thought about. And I think what you apply to your life, cars, watches, etc., could be applied to many, many other things. So I'm actually going to end now today's episode, and I really want to thank you for joining us. And we hope that all of you have enjoyed our conversation with Shashi, and that you had a glimpse at that very amazing journey between pragmatism and romanticism. Shashi, thank you very much.
Max, thank you so much for having me today.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you've enjoyed our conversation with Shashi and that you had a glimpse at his fascinating journey. We'll soon be back for a conversation with another of our tribe members. If you enjoyed today's episode, remember to subscribe to our podcast so as not to miss our next conversations. Stay curious, keep exploring, and cherish your madness.